I'm just going to take you through the basics of drawing in Flash. There's a couple of tools that I recommend you stick to. There's lots of different drawing tools in Flash. Some of them are quite complex and you can get yourself in a bit of a muddle. There's a couple of simple ones I would stick to, and most things you want to draw, you should be able to with those. So coming over on the left hand side here, the first tool we're going to look at is the brush tool. The brush tool you'll want to use if you're doing any kind of freehand type of drawing. One thing to check before you start, down here is a little button. It's called it's labeled Object Drawing. You want to make sure that is not pressed in. Pressed in, it looks like that. Not pressed in, it looks like that. If you press this in, as you draw, you're going to end up with a load of individual shapes, individual parts. If I select these, you'll see all of these are individual separate objects that I can move around. The problem with that is if you're trying to draw filled areas, it becomes very difficult. If I draw part of a circle there and I try and finish off the circle, those are two separate parts and you can't fill this area in the middle. It won't work. If I go to the fill bucket here and I try and fill that in, nothing happens because Flash considers these to be two separate objects rather than one joined circle here. So always make sure with the brush tool, in fact any of the drawing tools, that this button is not pressed in. I'm going to unpress that. I'm just going to go back to my blank sheet using undo. From the edit menu, undo is Command Z. If I would learn that keyboard shortcut because you're going to be using it an awful lot in Flash. So Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. Back to the start. Alright, next thing to note with the brush tool. Down on the color selection areas here, there's two colors that you can pick, two colors you can select. The first one, the stroke color, is the outline color. The brush tool doesn't use this at all. So I tend to leave it set to this, which means no color, no outline. The only color that the brush tool cares about is this one, the fill color, the bucket. So I've got that set on black. Once you've got the color selected, down here you'll see a little button that lets you control the brush size. So there's a variety of thicknesses of brush you can use here. I'm going to stick to this one for now. And this gives you a brush shape. So I'll keep it simple and stick to the round brush for now. Fill color, brush size, brush shape, and make sure the object drawing button is not clicked. Lastly, if you come over the right hand side here, there's the properties for the brush tool, and this value down here, the smoothing value, you can adjust. If you click on it, you can see I can slide it left to 0 or right to 100. I tend to leave this set in the middle. What this does, it's a value that determines how much smoothing Flash applies to your drawing. Now what I mean by that, if I try and draw a square using the brush tool, drawing with the mouse is pretty tricky, so your hand's going to wobble a bit, won't be quite right. But when I let go with the mouse, you'll see Flash tidies that drawing up for me. It smooths it off. If I draw a circle, likewise, it's a bit wonky, but it smooths it off. It also kind of styles it in a kind of cartoony style, which I think looks quite nice. If you put the smoothing on 0, then your drawing will be left pretty much as you draw it. So there's no smoothing applied, which means you get these kind of wobbly bits where your hand shook. If you put the smoothing too high, then you can end up with bits of your shape missing because Flash tries to style it too much. So what you need to do is experiment and find a value that works for you. I tend to leave it around about 50. That gives me a good mix between accuracy and smoothing things off. So going back to a blank sheet again, we're going to draw, I'm going to try and draw a rocket. So with the brush tool here, I'm going to get my main shape done. There it is. So I'm going for a kind of cartoony look. There's one wing. Now you might decide that that's a bit too stylized, a bit too smoothed off. And get the flames out the bottom. Stick a window in the side. Right, so there's my rocket. So works quite well, looks quite good with the smooth off lines. You'll notice something. If I go back to the selection tool here and I click on one of these filled in areas, you'll see that every other bit of the drawing that touches that area has now been joined to it. This has become a single object, a single drawing object. These weren't touching, so they're not linked to it as yet. And that's one of the things about drawing in Flash that's a little bit strange. As you draw things of the same color, if they overlap, they glue themselves together. Can be pretty good most of the time, can be pretty useful most of the time, but sometimes you have to watch out for that. Because these are glued together, that they're a single shape, which means I should be able to use the fill bucket to add some color to my drawing here. So if we head over here to the bucket tool, I need to make sure I'm picking the fill color from here, not the outline color. So I'll have our rocket to be, we'll make it grey with dark grey fins and a window outline and our spike. Blue window and some flames. Red, orange, and yellow. Works pretty nicely. If I click on this grey bit, you'll see it's a separate item to the rest of the drawing. That means, just Command Z to undo that. That means if you want to move this rocket to somewhere else on the page here, you need to make sure you drag a selection box around so you've got all of the parts of your rocket here. If I double click, it selects the color I've clicked on plus the objects contained within it. If you want to select the whole thing, drag a box around, which means you can then move it to wherever you want. Another strange thing about drawing with Flash with the brush tool when you're using multiple colors here is you've got to be careful when different colors overlap. So when the same colors overlap, they touch each other and they glue together, they become one. Like this black outline here, it's one single object. This bit here is separate. If I happen to move it and I drop it here and I click away so it's no longer selected, what that's done now is chopped a hole in the other colors that it sat on top of. So if you draw things of the same color and they overlap, they glue together. If you draw things of different colors and they overlap, they cut through each other. You can use this to your advantage. We'll look at this later on, but you do need to watch out for that. So once again, Command Z, undo, is your best friend here. Okay, so there's our rocket back together. If you want to change color of something, by the way, so this, if the panels of the wings of my rocket here are a bit too dark, if I select it and I choose a different fill color, so if we make them blue instead, you can see it changes colour. It'll change just by picking the colour on the left hand side. The selected object is changed. Or you can have nothing selected, go to the bucket tool, and you can pour the colour into the area you want to change.